So thanks everyone who is here for being on time. We really appreciate it. Thanks so much for Jorge Barrig for taking the time to be here with us very early in the morning, Argentinian time. For everyone who is unaware of what the session is about, which I hope is not the case, this session is going to be focusing on supporting entrepreneurs in the sustainability and green economy. As you guys have probably seen, the Yay community has taken a big focus on this recently, as has all of ITC. We're really working to support ecopreneurs, as we call them, and we've been working with a number of partners on this. One of which so kindly linked us to PFAN and Jorge. So for those who aren't familiar with PFAN, it stands for the Private Financing Advisory Network, and it is a public-private initiative of UNIDO, and Jorge Barrig is the Regional Transaction Manager, and he works towards accelerating investment for climate and the clean energy economy. So we're thrilled to have him here with us today, sharing all the insights about how you as mentors can better support youth entrepreneurs in the green economy, in sustainability. What we've seen in the Yay community is that a lot of the entrepreneurs who are trying to work in this space are coming from ecosystems where they don't have access to technical expertise, and this is where they really need support and guidance and access to networks. So that's why we're so thrilled to have Jorge here today, who is an expert in this area and who is providing through PFAN direct financing to clean energy startups. So with that, Jorge, I will pass it over to you and let you take us through a bit of information about what PFAN does so everyone can get some background, and then specifically how PFAN is working to support startups to scale in this sector. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Claire, and thank you very much to all of you who have joined us. I see that we are thus far 6. What that means to me is that we're the ones we're the early bird, as it were. One moment. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share my screen and. Let's see now. Come on. Can I share my screen, Claire?
You should be able to.
Okay. So. Share.
Are you having issues, or is it not showing up as possible?
Who can share? It says, well, okay, hang on one moment. Let me try again. Share screen. Let's see. My screen is not sharing, apparently. I'm not understanding why that is.
I can go ahead and share mine if you prefer.
If you don't mind, I think I might have to ask you to do it.
That is not a problem at all. Let me just.
Well, while Claire is helping us out with this, I want to congratulate all of you, because the work that you guys do is many things, but one of the things that is not is boring. It is and it varies depending on your client, depending on the sector, and it varies depending on what the objectives are. Thank you very much, Claire. If you don't mind, I will let you know when to change the grade. So my name is Jorge Barrig, and my background is all in private sector, in energy and finance, and in entrepreneurship. In the energy space, I've worked in traditional energy, renewable energy, energy efficiency, and also in the hydrogen space. In addition to the different value chain elements within the energy space. Also, the integration of energy solutions for climate smart agriculture, for logistics, etc. So I come from that type of a background. Currently, I'm the regional transaction manager for the PFAN network in Latin America and the Caribbean. I work with my regional coordinator, Mr. Federico Fiche, and we have started working mostly in from Mexico to Colombia, but now we have expanded our mandate to include the rest of South America, given the demand that we're seeing and the success that we have seen as well. In addition to that, I work with impact investors and in doing due diligence on projects, and so that's extremely helpful because I tend to be very close to what investors are looking for or what strategic partners are looking for. One of my recent clients is Heifer Impact Capital, which is a very interesting firm, also focusing in the climate smart space and the integration of renewable energy and cold chain into productivity projects in the Latin America and the Caribbean, in addition to elsewhere. So my background, and I'm sharing this with you because I do come from that background where, like you, I want to be helpful. I want to be pragmatic. I want to make sure that these lofty ideas, these really good entrepreneurial ideas, are able to eventually land in a sustainable fashion, whether they begin with grants or they begin with some type of blended finance. The ability to have these projects land is how we define success. So them landing sustainably and continuing. Could we move to the next slide?
It should be showing the next slide now. Is it not?
Next slide, please.
It should be on the what we do slide. Do you see that?
Yes, now I see it.
Okay.
Apologies. It looks like my internet connection is a little unstable, but we're worked with it in the past. Global, their mission is global, have lots of initiatives in Africa and also Asia. In Latin America, we recently returned, but it's a global network of climate and clean energy financing experts. It's important to highlight that by and large, our coaches are coaches that have a track record in the field and have themselves either taken projects to financial close or have participated in financial close. And that has been an important differentiating element for our coaches in the network. So we offer business coaching and investment facilitation. And it's the type of entrepreneurs that you guys are familiar with and you guys are likely working with. They don't have to be projects, big tide projects, so to speak. It can be an innovation within the climate change space or an innovation within the clean energy space, such as, for instance, smart meters. Or meters that will reduce non-technical losses in the region, which can be high. But I just want to make that distinction because at a certain point in history, we were really focused on mainstreaming renewable energy, as it were, or these types of technologies. We are past that now. We are now looking at, and that's really good news. We are now past that, and we are now focusing on different elements of the green economy because it's an upstream and downstream process. There's no project too small. There are projects that don't make sense, but there's no project too small that we will not take a look at and see how we can strengthen it. One other element that is important to highlight is that we've also developed in the region a network of investors. So we have a very tightly knit network of investors, impact investors, family offices, private equity that are interested in different areas in the space, even some different areas in the ESG world. And every quarter, we have meetings with them to kind of keep them up to date on what are the trends that we are seeing in the space. And that allows us to keep those bridges fresh between what we're seeing from developers, what we're seeing from entrepreneurs, and what we're seeing in terms of interest areas for different types of investors. Could we move to the next slide? All right, we're a global network. I think that I already mentioned some of this, so we're going to move on to the next one. Okay, so this is what we're trying to address, right? There's a limited supply of investor-ready projects. There's not a limited supply of projects. There's a limited supply of investor-ready projects, and so there's projects that are lack investor-ready structure. And that means many different things. Every project is its own universe. Every small company is its own universe. So it's going to vary on a case-by-case basis. There's always a need for strengthening financial and commercial skills. Sometimes there's a need to focus on the regulatory elements. Sometimes there's a need to focus on governance. I cannot emphasize the importance of governance enough for investors. So there's always a need. It doesn't matter how much experience the entrepreneur or the project has. There's always a need for strengthening those skills, and we experience that need as well as coaches. And once again, being a coach has been one of the most fertile things I've ever chosen to do in my career, because, as I said, it's never boring, and you're learning every single day. And that, for me at least, it's a motivator. And the next thing is that you tend to have unrealistic expectations. An entrepreneur, by definition, believes that his or her that their innovation, that what they're bringing to the market, is the next best thing since sliced bread. That it's impossible for anybody to find a flaw in their plan. And that is fantastic. You want that kind of enthusiasm and faith. Without that, they wouldn't be entrepreneurs. They wouldn't be risk takers the way that they are. That said, this is where the coach, the mentor, has to also be a little bit of a companion, a little bit of an accomplice, and a little bit of a therapist at the same time. Everything at the same time, and walk along with the investor to ensure that they can begin to hear messages they don't like to hear without walking away, especially if they have a very strong project. Excuse me. But then that's focusing on the entrepreneur side. How about on the finance side? Well, there's not enough investment addressing existing supply. What does that mean? Well, financing is available. I don't think I have ever seen a more favorable set of conditions for financing or investment in our space. Well, in fact, I'll be clear, I have never seen that more favorable conditions. That said, it's an evolving culture and risk assessment. Just because I'm a fund manager, just because I manage $1 billion or $50 million doesn't mean, and I have a mandate to invest in green technologies, doesn't mean that my due diligence assessment or my risk assessment or my understanding of local culture is up to par. It means that I'm interested, it means that I'm open, but it means that I might be applying risk models, or I might be applying return expectation models that do not fit. And so part of the work that we also find ourselves doing is trying to bring along the investor so that they better understand the local context, they better understand the opportunity, and they better understand the risk assessment. And they can contextualize them in a different way. And perhaps through that, they can apply a different set of financial mechanisms to address some of those stages. In addition to that, there is a lot of familiarity with technologies and with business applications in the field. But everybody who has done a project like this knows, and you guys as mentors and coaches absolutely know that the best business plan begins to fall apart the moment you begin to implement it. That's just life. And so the resilience and the flexibility of your business owner becomes the biggest strength of moving forward, in addition to their faith. So you have to understand that. And investors also need to understand that even though they understand the ins and outs of, well, what's hot and sexy these days is green hydrogen, right? So green hydrogen, green hydrogen, green. Well, everybody kind of understands. It's not a new technology. We're not reinventing the wheel here. We're talking about scaling up, which is a different type of value proposition. But we have to understand, even investors, that there's limited familiarity with those technologies, and especially with how we will apply them, and especially, and sorry, I'm gonna say especially again because it matters, how we apply them and how we apply them within the context of that project or that specific entrepreneur entrepreneurial opportunity. And this is an area that this matters because, for example, and this is very, very recent in my head because I was just dealing with this particular type of client, a small company, very small company. They don't produce hydrogen, they don't produce fuels, they don't produce gases of any sort. They are a compression company, which is a completely different animal. But you need their specific branded technology for compression in order to have transport a better transport and storage infrastructure for these types of very light gases, whether it's industrial use or fuel use. So, but I know for a fact there's limited familiarity because they recently received a private equity investment, and it took some time to get everybody more or less on the same page. Limited experience with successful exits in this space. Yeah, it's a new space. If it's a traditional utility type of project, there's some experience in terms of what that looks like. But even then, there's limited experience with exits that are successful. And it's going to, and the good news, I think, for the space is that it's wide open. And we're going to get good experiences and we're going to get bad experiences. And we're going to learn from those bad experiences. So could we move on to the next thing? All right, so this is how PFAN does it, right? You guys might do it in a different way, or different coaching networks do it in a different way. Nothing is free in life. So what we're meaning to say here is that it's at no cost to entrepreneurs, but because our services are paid for by donors. That's all that it means. I don't like to use the word free services because it gives a wrong impression. I think it's at no cost to the entrepreneur because of the emphasis that the donors would like to give to this process. There is a fixed fee for advisors, and our advisors also are encouraged to perhaps, depending on their relationship with the project, to negotiate a success fee that's separate. And that's between them and the project. We want success. We want to define success, and sometimes having interests aligned is helpful in that sense. Not always, but sometimes. Extensive network of partners. We're hosted by UNIDO. Okay, and so low overhead networking business model. Okay, and these are some of our funders. These are not all of our funders, all of our donors, but at PFAN there have been others, and there are others that are not mentioned there. Please move on to the next slide. So this is essentially our track record. 180 projects thus far that we have helped raise financing for. A success rate from identifying to close is about 18%. Not all projects will make it all the way. Some projects take longer than others. We measure the impact in terms of CO2 reductions or mitigated if we can best calculate them. Very, very important to highlight the SDGs and the importance of some of these goals. including gender, poverty reduction, industry, climate action, partnerships, because the funds, not just because we think that they are the types of objectives that we also need to be measuring, need to be improving on, but also because there is an entire different class of investor now that is looking for these types of metrics. And they want to, and they can be very, very, well, on the one hand, very clear on the kind of indicators they seek, what kind of impact they wish to make, and then the importance of several of these development goals to approve a potential investment. So it doesn't always make it easier. You see, nothing, as I said earlier, nothing is free, right? So before, some of these projects that were more social based, we're going to have a harder time because of how we would be measuring them, how we would be evaluating them. How do we define return? How do we define success? So they would have had a harder time. Today, there's an investor class looking for those projects. And so the door is open, but the work, the attention to detail, the reporting, the measurement, the MRV, the monitoring and reporting and verification elements are going to be higher than for traditional investors. This is all fine. It's important for the objectives. Anyway, can we move on to the next slide? So this is just our process. Depending on the market, depending on the geographic area, some of the filters are more stringent than others. We differentiate markets that way. So in Latin America, we can be very strict in terms of what we expect from projects that, or for projects or ventures that would like to receive this support. In other areas, we can be less strict because we really want to generate much more interest and activity. For instance, in the Caribbean, you don't have big scale projects. In the Caribbean, there's a lot of there's a lot of opportunities for projects, but because the scale tends to be smaller, then it's harder for projects to make it across those first filters. So we've had to adjust those filters, for example. Whereas, you know, if we're looking at a market like Mexico, if we're looking at a market like Colombia, especially Colombia these days, you know, the level of complexity of some of these projects is going to be at a higher level. Plus, the scale is higher, so it's easier to make the case from a traditional perspective, and that's important to highlight. We don't always look for the traditional perspective. We've learned that this is a very fertile ecosystem. We move on to the next one. Okay, so all right, this is just how the pipeline works. And these are all the stages in which we can become involved. Please share the presentation with all the participants, Claire. And I'm open to questions at any time. Let's move on to the next slide. How the pipeline works, right? So these are the basics that we look for. It's important. Excuse me. Selection criteria. The selection criteria, that's for entry into the pipeline, into the PFAN pipeline. It's very, very important that we highlight that we are not looking for proof of concept. We're looking for projects that we feel have already transited a bit down this route. So they're commercially viable and we know it. They're technically viable and we know it. There's growth potential. There's a management team with a track record and experience. There is more than a discernible climate impact. There's a measurable climate impact. There's a measurable development and gender impact as well. These are some elements that for us are important in the selection criteria. And we'll take all sorts of projects that there's a slide that actually focuses on all of the projects, but I took it out because it's just too crowded now. We used to only look for renewable energy and energy efficiency projects. That is no longer the case. We are open to many types of projects and ventures that will that will strengthen the GHG reduction capacity of our productivity processes. So if we move on to the next thing. All right, so I want to devote a little bit of time to the specifics here. And you guys must do this fairly frequently with all your ventures as well, because the first thing that we do is always we review and provide an in-depth assessment of the project from a technical, commercial, financial, and regulatory and ESG perspective. First, we do a broad view, and every single coach is going to do it a little bit differently. And it's important that we highlight that we have some coaches that are specialists in either just the regulatory process or the legal process or financial modeling. But all of us, by and large, have had enough experience to be able to give it an in-depth assessment of where the project sits right now. This includes a sober assessment of gaps, strengths, and unrealized opportunities. Every single project is going to have some gaps. Every single project is going to have strengths, it's going to have weaknesses, and what we like to call unrealized opportunities or harvestable opportunities that haven't really been looked at. And so when we sit with the entrepreneur and we share with them our assessment, it should always highlight all of those elements. We don't, and this is another element that I guess it reflects a personal bias, but I think it works very well, is that we don't waste time too much with, we're just very clear and very transparent and very direct. In some cultures, it's harder to do than others, but we find that in the end, the entrepreneur is appreciative of the fact that, we cut straight to it, that, if the financial models discount rate assumptions were just impossible, it's unrealistic, then we just say, I don't know where you got this. Could you explain this to me, please? Or if the sales projections are way too optimistic, then again, it's an opportunity. You don't say, well, this is trash, this is bunk, even though you might know that it really is not going to fly. It's not investor ready. But when you approach your entrepreneur and you ask them to validate the assumptions. That validation exercise for every single one of the gaps that you identify is one of the most valuable tools you're going to have. You're not challenging them directly. You're asking for validation of the assumptions, validations of what got us here. And the important thing is you're not questioning their vision. You just want to make sure that you understand it as well as they do. And that really makes an enormous difference, because sometimes a coach and the entrepreneur, the chemistry is not going to be there. And it's very, very important to be able to understand that upfront and to have very clear discussions about that. And if necessary, change the coach. And that's okay, because it's not always going to work out. So then what we do is an assessment. What I like to do is an assessment of relative attractiveness to a network of investors. Is this closer to the family office that is looking for smaller energy efficiency deals in hotels? Or is this closer to a biomass investor that has just keyed into the fact that we have a seaweed problem caused by changing currents and climate change in the Caribbean, and therefore suddenly we have sargasso weed all over our beaches in the Caribbean, and what can we do with that? Or perhaps it has to do with the development of fast-growing switchgrass or bamboo in order to either for energy purposes or for carbon capture purposes. So an assessment of the relative attractiveness to a certain network of investors. Who will it fit for? There's also the network of venture philanthropists, right? If it's a project that's microgrids in a really, really poor section of Haiti, for example, well, there's going to be a profile there. It's not going to be the traditional private equity investor that's going to want to dive in there. So we do that assessment and try to begin to match up what the project could benefit from. The slides will be available. Claire will share them with everybody after this. Then we want to make sure we're strengthening the commercial case. We're validating the commercial case, validating the business model, the market model, the evaluation of risks. An entrepreneur is so enthusiastic about their venture that there are risks that they take very seriously, and there are risks that they gloss over. It's okay. That's why more heads are better than one, and that's a real strength of supporting them as a coach. Then you do an in-depth review of financial assumptions, of what the cost structures, the variable and fixed costs, or the financial costs that perhaps they haven't taken into consideration. If you yourself are not very strong in financial model review, I suggest that you, because this is something we do, there's something I do. It's been a long time since I was just looking at spreadsheets all the time and modeling. I will talk to somebody who does this all the time, and it's within the network, and I will ask them to please review, because it's a lot easier for them to do it, and they have a lot more experience in doing it. Excuse me. So, but that in-depth review is it's extremely important. Excuse me. All of this process feeds into an updated business planning exercise with specific attention placed on the financial model when it requires it, right? So this is one of the core areas that we really focus on from the beginning. Could we move on to the next one? And that I focus on in person. Then it's a matter, then it's something, then it's putting the whole case together. And it's extremely important to pay a great deal of attention to detail. It's really important. Sometimes the idea is bigger than the specifics on how you get there, but regardless of how great the idea is, eventually it's got to be put on paper. Other people who are not sold on your project are going to read it. And you need to pay attention to detail and how you present it. So, in-depth assistance in the reevaluation, preparation, and finalization of internal project deliverable documents. Within the PFAN process, we have different types of documents that we expect. And so that allows us the opportunity to work with the entrepreneurs on developing these documents, on strengthening these documents, on presenting these documents. It is important to highlight that we do not do the work for them. We will review the work. We will provide guidance. We will bring in outside assistance or help them with outside assistance and identify it and incorporating it within the project. But the project is theirs. The venture is theirs. And so we're not taking ownership away from it. We're just providing key support in the right places. I've been going through this process as if we were doing the entire thing. We're not. We're just walking with them through the entire process. And in some areas we will dive in some areas we will not. It all depends, project by project. Then we focus on potential pitches, the definition of the appropriate champions and delivery of these, and the differentiating elements to highlight. Depending on who the potential investors or the partners are sought. Sometimes the project doesn't need immediate cash infusion or resource infusion. Sometimes what they need is a strategic distribution partner, somebody who has a better idea, more of a global view. And so bringing them and talking to them, being able to present them to a partner in the same room makes an enormous amount of difference. The other element I'm going to highlight here is that when I say appropriate champions in delivery of these pitches, it's that sometimes the entrepreneur is the wrong person to be making the pitch. Sometimes it's somebody who's a partner or somebody who knows the project. Sometimes it's a language issue. And I've been in pitches where The English presentation was a disaster. But but that was okay. I mean, the entrepreneur spoke English well, but wasn't comfortable delivering the presentation in English. And it showed. Body language specifically showed. So the words said something very clear, consistent, and the body language completely betrayed him because it's just human nature. Some things you're more comfortable at than others. So we changed it up a little bit and we told this entrepreneur, we said, make this presentation in Spanish. We will have translation for you. And it was night and day. It was completely different. And it's those types of things that make a difference for a coach. A coach can guide an entrepreneur along even those small decisions that have significant impact. So there's the presentation and the pitch, the clear identification of needs. Oh, I better hurry up. Questioning and this is another important element. Validation of the ask. What are you specifically asking for? Are you sure this is what you need? Are you sure this is the timing? Are you sure that it's equity? It's not debt. It's not blended. It's not some type of guarantee. It's not a factoring product. So then the potential investors, I said that they were a very fertile group. Next slide. We're almost done. And then what we do is we usually present them. We have investor roundtables, and we'll invite 5 projects to pitch, and we will work through them. And it's a very iterative process. Some potential investors will participate with us in these mock investor roundtables until we finally do an investor roundtable. Once the investor roundtable is done, we can continue to support the entrepreneur and the project throughout negotiation, structuring, negotiation, closing of deals to reach financial closure. So that so we can go from the very beginning all the way to the very end. It's going to vary on a project by project basis. Could we go to the next slide? Right, and then this is in one slide. In one slide, it tells you the different elements in terms of service offering that we provide to entrepreneurs and to investors, from the origination to facilitation, and then even what we call tipping point, which is just the final elements necessary for them to reach financial closing. Like for instance, a final legal review. We have resources for that, and we can also support them through some of our legal services. The next slide. Okay, and this is what PFAN does. I think all of you are familiar with the types of different types of funding that we don't get involved at the seed funding or the grant funding area. We're more like a project strengthening or project preparation facility. And then we have the linkages with impact investors, commercial finance, private equity, family offices, etc. So next slide, and I think we're done. Yes. I'm sorry, I took about 42 minutes. I only expected to take about 30 minutes. Apologies. Actually, this is about a conversation, so I'm going to stop here and let you guys. And if you have any questions, let's go.
I didn't want to stop you because I felt like it was really, really useful presentation, and yeah, judging by Paul's reaction, I think others felt the same. So I didn't see any questions coming in the chat box, but if you'd like to use the raise your hand feature and unmute yourself, we'd be happy to take your questions directly. So yeah, any questions? Silence. Maybe I can start things off here because I know Jorge, for the Yay community, where we're specifically working with youth entrepreneurs, it can be difficult to see sometimes how we can help them to reach this stage of development. especially for young entrepreneurs that lack the expertise and lack the access to networks to build a proper managerial team. So yeah, I was wondering, because obviously you guys don't work at the seed stage, how can we as a network like the Yay community and as ITC, who are working specifically with youth in developing countries, properly prepare? What kind of services should coaches or mentors be offering to get ventures to the stage where they can take advantage of PFAN's support?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'll say is that the regardless of the stage of the project, we have found that there's always a need for better networking. There's always a need to strengthen. Islanding is not what you want in this particular type of a setting, especially on entrepreneurial settings. I think that there's several key elements for a successful coach or a successful mentor. And, I use those words interchangeably because they are, in practical terms, they are. And again, whether it's a very successful project or entrepreneur, or whether it's, a young university graduate, or not even a university graduate with a brand new idea, I think that the support that we can provide is similar. Here's a couple of things. Here's several things that I made a quick list that I think makes a difference. Number one, the capacity to listen. The capacity to listen. It sounds like it is the most, like it is common sense, but the capacity to listen is something that has been extremely valuable to me. It's been extremely valuable to all of our network of coaches. The patience also to understand, and this comes a little bit with practice, right? Because there are some entrepreneurs that are just so convinced about their project that, the patience is something that is helpful. Attention to detail. I see a hand up, but let me just finish the list quickly. Attention to detail. I cannot emphasize this enough. Really, really, really important. And it's not just about, how you present your business case, but you have to pay attention to all the details from A to Z, right? It's supremely important. And it's not, you can't just gloss over things. The importance of track record. You have to know your customer. You have to know the entrepreneur you're working with. You have to know what their background is, and you have to know, you have to get a really good sense for them. The track record is going to be supremely important for an investor, supremely important. Or if one of the partners of your entrepreneur has a track record, it makes a big difference. So this is important. Be clear. It's important for the investor to be clear on what they're bringing to the table, what's produced, what problem they are solving, and why their problem is differentiated from other problems. Why it's going to provide a solution. It's important that be clear, and the ability to share and to hear bad news or messages you're not used to getting. The importance of incorporating the potential of failure as a strength. In some cultures, that is really hard because, failure is stigmatized, or hearing no is almost not done in some cultures either. Well, as coaches, we also have to be good at managing, at navigating those cultural waters. I'm going to stop here because there's a hand up.
Yeah, that was excellent. Over to you, Ahmed, sorry. If you'd like to unmute.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And of course, thank you, the presenter. This has actually been really, really amazing. As in, it's really, really amazing. Thank you very much. My questions are actually in two parts. And is basically trying to highlight two case study, and of course, how does it apply to the opportunity, and of course, maybe some guidance you can provide as well. In case of an organization, pretty new, but we have a model, actually an organic model in which we're already in about 21 countries across Asia. And of course, we're working with young entrepreneurs who most actually basically adopting the model. What we're trying to do, it's actually in plastic waste, and this is actually carried on by basically using media, basic media like WhatsApp. We organize in different, we call them activation hubs. And through this, actually in different countries, young people actually organize themselves, have a leadership structure, and of course they are able to carry on activities which interacting with community. We usually work with the most vulnerable community in actually helping building sustainable plastic waste management models. But I'm not sure is okay, not a very how does this kind of business, does it fit into the level of maturity you're looking at? Already we've been able to through our global partner, we actually have been able to make over $2,000 in revenue from August till now. Okay, this is one. Does this fit into a category of business that actually meet the requirement for what you're looking at? The second one is actually another project we're working on, which actually basically exploring digital platform, mobile application actually in perfecting at challenges of food waste, food security, climate change. But this technology is not fully ready. So does this actually fit into another thing I wanted to ask? The model is similar, but in terms of where we have a global solution outlook. Does this fit into the level of business that interests your organization in terms of stuff? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. I think that you mentioned two different ventures, and you wanted to know. You gave a brief description of these ventures. I think the first one was related to plastic use and recycling.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and the second was related to food security, correct?
Yes.
It's in principle, yes. If you're based in Asia, in principle, it's hard to say, but conceptually, yes, they would technically fit into what sustainability and climate change, greenhouse gas reduction projects, or even adaptation and resilience projects, because that's where we are now. That PPAN would be interested in taking a look at. So in principle, without taking a broader look on where you're at, it sounds like you already have sales on the one on one project, commercial sales. That's revenue that you shared. I don't know what your margins are on that, or what your expansion plans are on that, because scale is going to be important, and for something like plastics and especially recycling, scale and supply is key. It depends on where you're. But in principle, yes, they could fit, and we have an Asia group of the Private Finance Advisory Network that I would be happy to put you in touch with. If you can share some of that information, or you can go to our website, which is pfan.net.
Sorry, I'm actually, we do actually have operation in Asia and Africa, but I'm actually based in Africa. We headquarter in Africa.
I'm sorry. Okay, hang on for a sec. I'm going to say, everyone, I made a mistake. pfan.net. Okay, well, we have an Africa group as well, but a very active Africa group. I could see several things there. Number one, there's PFAN, and then this other impact investor that I work with also is very active in Africa. So if I think my contact information is provided, so if you would like to reach out in private, that would be feel free to, and I'll refer you. That way they can give you a better idea. Also, I see here that Paul sent me a note. Okay. And the same thing would apply to you, Paul, in terms of that potential opportunity in Iran. I think that if you can reach out to me directly, I think my email is on the presentation. Then just reach out. We have a group that also focuses on that part of the world. I will. There's my email as well, in case you didn't catch it. So just reach out, send it to us. Listen, I agree. One of the things that I've learned in this life is that a quick no is much better than a long yes. So it's much better, especially for an entrepreneur for whom time is money, literally sometimes. It's important for us to give you a really quick idea of whether we think it fits or it doesn't fit, or perhaps where you should go. Or whether it's just not going to go anywhere, and maybe you should talk to foundations for grant funding or something like that.
Great. Do we have any other questions? I don't see any other hands raised. I have another question then. I wanted to ask you, Jorge, about IP, because we've seen, especially when it comes to supporting youth entrepreneurs, that there's a lot of emphasis lately on ensuring that you have proper IP protections in place at the very start of your business. Is this also something that is critically important for the investors that PFAN is working with, that the proper IP is protected for the businesses?
Not so much. It hasn't been, but that's because we have traditionally focused on a different segment of projects. Now we're beginning to see projects that would require, for instance, I mentioned this Sargasso seaweed treatment. That requires IP. And even though the company was a combination of a Canadian and Mexican, one of the important questions up front was, well, where are you at with your intellectual property? And IP is only important, but only important if it is a strong barrier to entry, so your competitors can't get at you. I was taking a look at some solar cook stoves that were, claiming significant IP. Well, I don't think that's a big barrier to entry, because there's many ways to do solar cook stoves, right? Not just one way. So it's going to vary project by project. IP is important, but more important for some than for others. But where it is important, then the initial support should be focused on strengthening that IP. And it also depends on what markets you're going to dive into, right? There are some countries where IP really doesn't matter as much as others, meaning that if you go in there, they will replicate your work regardless. So it depends on what market. So it's on the starting side and also on the demand side. You have to review it on a case-by-case basis.
Great, thank you. All right, I will put it to the group for a last round of questions. We have about 3 minutes left. Any hands? Don't be shy. This is your opportunity to ask. No? Okay.
Well, Claire, I'm grateful for this opportunity. I want to congratulate all of you for doing this kind of work. It is sometimes not the most traditionally rewarding work, but it is extraordinarily rewarding in many other ways, ways that to me are important. Like every single day, I'm taking a look at something and I'm learning. Plus, we're working to improve the way we do things. And so we have frustrating days, but we don't have boring days. And that to me matters. And with good humor and patience, we get there. So thank you all. Congratulations all for being mentors and coaches. It is not easy, and it certainly isn't doesn't have the cachet that saying investment banker would have, right? But
Yes.
we do extraordinarily important work, and I want to congratulate each and every one of you for the role you're taking in Claire, you and the team as well at ITC.
Yes, and thank you so much, Jorge, for taking the time this morning, very early in your morning, to speak with everyone. And we'll definitely be sharing this throughout our mentor community, because I think the insights that you shared were essential. So thank you so much for taking the time to put the presentation together. And for everyone who's here, as mentioned, I will share the presentation. I will share the recording later today. And yeah, you have Jorge's email, so don't hesitate to reach out. So thanks everyone, and have a good rest of your day.